Hey, this is George from Kingfisher Woodworks. This week we're doing a veneer project, so stick around for some concentrated work, some extreme confidence,
I have no idea if this is going to work.
and a pretty cool end product. So this is table number 2 of the 3 that we decided to film, and we're going to start by building this base. So this is a pyramid base that I designed, and I'm building out a 3/4 inch Baltic birch plywood, and then I'm going to veneer over it. So you can see me cutting the panels out and then cutting the templates out that all those panels will be flush trimmed to, so they're the same size. So I think it's important to note that I've never veneered anything in my life. The conference table I've got to build after this has been on order for 3 years, and it's got some veneer work in it. So I had to order all the equipment for veneering to do that table anyway, and I just very randomly got this order from a client to build a fully veneered dining room table. So I figured it would be a good opportunity to practice and learn how to do it. And that was probably a pretty bold decision because I think this table will be way more difficult than the next one as far as veneering's concerned. Definitely not as far as joinery, but you can see some water actually got onto this plywood, and there's so much pressure in the vacuum bag that it was squeezing it out. But this was my first time using the vacuum bag, and I was really excited about it. It's really, really cool.
You may be wondering what this little tent's for. I got a heater in here, and I keep a finish in here, and it keeps it so the finish doesn't freeze because the shop is not heated.
Oh, that freaking guy. So here we take our double-sided tape and we stick the template onto our just glued together panels. So again, I glued 2 3/4 inch pieces of plywood together to create 1.5 inches for more stability and weight. Now, to flush trim this, you really want to do it in sections because it's so thick, and it's a little much for the flush trim bit just to take a full 1.5 inches off. So you do one section, take the template off, and then that one section you already flush trimmed, you use that to flush trim it on the rest of the panel. So you can see on the bottom it's flush trimmed, and then we get the top there, and then the whole thing is flush trimmed and everything's the exact same size. So here's the veneer we're using. It's elm burl veneer from GL Veneer, and I got 3 sheets of it, and it is $800 a sheet, so very high stakes. And you can see me taking the sides of the pedestal and scribing and cutting out the different sections of it. And I tried to do it with that veneer saw, but I found the track saw was a lot faster and worked a lot better, so I ended up using that. And I couldn't get 4 full sections for each side of the pedestal out of it, so I had to piece one together, and you can see me doing that right here. Now, my plan is to veneer 2 sides of the pedestal before assembly, and then once the pedestal is together, I'll veneer the other 2 sides. And I'm doing this so I will have an open area that I can put screws into the pedestal to hold it together, and then I can fill those screw holes and veneer over it. So this is my very first time veneering right here, and I was pretty nervous, but the vacuum bag made it really easy. I was really impressed with the bag. It just put so much pressure on it and made a perfect seam between the substrate and the veneer. So that was a really exciting moment. I was very happy with it. So the panels are out of the bag, and we move on to the next big question, which is how well does veneer flush trim? I have never done it, so I really have no idea. I was nervous it was going to chip out everywhere, but apparently you use a downcut flush trim bit, and it works really well. It really didn't have any issues with it. I obviously left way too much overhang because I was scared I was going to mess something up, but worked out really well. So now I'm setting the blade to 63.4 degrees, and that is to give the angle that the pyramid is rising up at. So I need to cut that on the top and bottom. Why did I choose 63.4 degrees and not a whole number? I cannot tell you. I guess I just put it in SketchUp. It looked good, and instead of making it easier on myself, I just went with that. So that's what we're doing right here, and I got my dad to help me with it. You can see I clamped on an extended fence just to have more surface to push that small edge against, and it was a little sketchy, but it ended up going together pretty well, and we were able to get the angles on both sides of it, and also got everything the exact same height. So here's my big plan. I'm going to use the dado stack to put rabbets on the ends of these panels, and then I'm just going to set them all together. And spoiler alert, this was not a good idea. You would think since this pyramid is square, everything would be 360 degrees, so 90 degrees would work. Well, Turns out that is not right.
Put the pyramid together. As you can see, where the corners meet, we're left with a bunch of angles. So that means I cut all this at 90 degrees, and because the angle that this thing's sloping in, I think it's throwing that 90 degrees off, and it's not actually 90 degrees anymore. So the question is, at that angle, what angle does this become?
I am just as confused by that as you are, and I could not figure this out. It took a full week, so I ended up posting it on Reddit, and I got almost 300 responses, and this guy was funny. You need Egyptians, not woodworkers, but this guy ended up figuring it out. 50.1 degrees, so shout out to True Illustrator. So figuring out that angle was actually pretty hardcore trigonometry, like not base level at all, and the formula for it was like a page long, so I just couldn't do it. So thank God for Reddit. So now I'm just filling those rabbets back in and getting everything ready so I can cut miters into it.
50.1, thank you, Reddit.
So I didn't want to lose any width, so I decided to use the joiner for this. And of course, in keeping with making this as difficult as possible, I just had to do pass after pass. 12 passes per side, 8 sides. That was 96 passes. And my arms hurt pretty bad after this, but it got it done. So there it is, all 4 sides with the miters on, ready to go. So now we take Tabletop Thixo epoxy, which this stuff is just fantastic. It doesn't drip, very long open time. You cannot have a piece of crap caulk gun to push it, which I did, and it made it very difficult. So some advice, use a nice caulk gun. But so now we're setting all the pieces together, and my plan is to get them in place and then use that nail gun to shoot some nails in just to hold it while I put screws in.
Difficult to move that with those stupid nails in. That did not work like I thought it was going to. Oh, God.
Yeah, bad decision. But we ended up getting it moved and got the countersinks for the screws drilled and started placing screws in. And this looks like it's like an inch off, but it was really about a quarter of an inch. So with some sanding and veneering over, it ended up being okay.
After this thing went together, little sketchy as you saw, but solid, and I think that's it. So next step is putting dowels, filling in all these screw holes, getting it flat, and then contact cementing this veneer on. And we'll just get it on all sides, and that should be it. Should be cool looking. Maybe.
Yeah, so the plan is to fill in all those countersunk screw holes. So here I'm cutting out some plugs and then making them fall with the bandsaw. I thought that shot was kind of cool, but yeah, so once we get all these cut out, we just stick some glue in the holes, stick them in there, and then Bondo over any little gaps that were left. And this is just to get this side of the pedestal completely flat. You only have to sand to 80 grit, and you're just getting it ready for the contact cement. And this is very nice contact cement, supposedly some of the best, and you put it on both the veneer and the substrate, and contact cement only sticks to contact cement. So when you go to put them together, they instantly stick to each other. And you just have to let the contact cement dry first, which is what's going on here. And, I followed the directions. I really paid attention. You can see me sticking it on right here, and it went on really well. It looked really cool, but as has been kind of the vibe of this project, there has to be an enormous problem. And put this on, went to sleep, woke up the next day, and it had completely failed. Like, it was just tearing away from it. So I had to go ahead and tear it off and then remove all the contact cement, which doesn't dry. So it was sticky, ruined a bunch of sandpaper, and had to come up with a different plan. And if you remember, I did not have enough veneer for even 4 full panels, so I had to go get all my offcuts of veneer and just kind of piece together a side, and I ended up being able to get a book match, but it was just so frustrating. And I certainly wasn't going to use contact cement again, so I went back to the glue I was using in the vacuum bag, and I came up with this kind of crazy plan to just clamp it down against this really flat tabletop. And those are the 2 boards I used to clamp it down, and all the clamps are off. I was honestly so frustrated I forgot to film, but glue dried, and it didn't work perfectly, but it worked really well, so we are going with it. And it has just been one thing after another with this project, but we are maintaining a good attitude. So now it's time to use the track saw to cut some little spaces in to put some braces in. So obviously the table can't just sit on that little square. We need some bracing. So using these cherry boards, and I'm cutting a little half lap in it right here so I can put the boards together and set them down in those holes. And laying out my little marks for the tapers so I can hide those braces a little better and it'll look a little cleaner and so on. So get the tapers cut, get the total bit epoxy in there, glue it all down, let it sit overnight, and then come back and clean it all up. And I am pretty relieved at this point to be getting right here. It has been a struggle to get this thing together, and it doesn't look too difficult, but it ended up being pretty complicated. So it is a pretty major relief to be done. But that is only half the table, so now we got to do the top. Now, the top is 84 inches diameter, and these veneer sheets are only 4 feet wide. So basically, this table has to be built in 2 separate halves. And thankfully, I had the foresight to get sequence sheets. So you can see these sheets have a book match down the middle, and the plan is to build each half of the table separately, veneer each half separately, and then join them. So that seam down the middle is really important, and I found butting the plywood together and then doing a single cut with the track saw was the best way to get a nice seam in the center. But now we need to cut the circle out. So to do that, I need to build a jig that can cut an 84-inch circle, and I'm using that Miles Craft circle cutting jig, which can't cut a circle that big, to cut a little hole to put this router in so I can cut a bigger circle. And that did not happen on the first try, as you can see right there. But I got the jig made, and with just some careful measuring, you clamp the 2 pieces of plywood together, screw that jig down, put the router in, and just put a 84-inch dado in there. And we only go about 1/4 of an inch down, and then finish the rest off with the jigsaw. Farm life. So that leaves a little bit of a lip, so we take it to the flush trim bit, get it all flushed up, and then we end up with 2 nice flat halves of an 84-inch circle. So these need to be joined together at some point, so we are going to do that with dominoes. So I'm laying out for dominoes right here and then cutting them right here. And that we have to use a lot of them because we cannot have any lip when we put that together, because we're not going to be able to sand much with the veneer on. So here we're cutting up some 1-inch plywood to create a false bottom. So we basically build an octagon and cut the circle out of that. And the reason we do that is because we do not want that plywood to be running all the way across, because this tabletop's already getting really heavy and we want to save a little weight. So connecting the octagon pieces with pocket holes and glue. And once the glue dried, I took the pocket holes out. But I did some things off camera here which involved veneering the bottom of the table. So due to the wood absorbing moisture, if you veneer one side, you have to veneer the other. So that's what I'm doing right here. I'm using cherry veneer, got that on the bottom, and then I'm putting the false thickness on there and then veneering over that. And then I come back and use a flush trim bit to get the veneer all tight to the edges and then get that false bottom tight to the actual circle. And so now I have a nice 1.5 inch thick edge, and I have to get that completely flat, nice and smooth, because I've got to prepare for edge banding. So that is putting a piece of veneer around the edge of the table, and that starts right here. So I'm cutting out the top veneer for the table, and I found the little trim router to be the best way to do that. So, you know, there's an $800 sheet cut out, and then now I cut out the edge banding. And these are just some thin strips of veneer, and I was really not sure how I was going to do this. I definitely didn't want to use contact cement again, but the people that made the bags actually told me about this ratchet strapping method, and I basically just put some blocks down so that I can clamp that ratchet strap against the table without it moving, and you put glue on, put the edge banding on, and then just clamp it down and tighten that ratchet strap as much as you can, which is what I did. And I was very surprised to say it worked perfectly. Like, it put perfectly even pressure around everything, and you can see the squeeze out right there. It really just worked out, so I was really thankful for that. And now I go through and flush trim that edge banding all down and get ready to veneer the top, which first I put a little tape around so there's no glue squeeze out onto that edge banding that I have to sand off. But now we are putting the top veneer on, and we just tape this down so it can't move, and then we take a big piece of melamine on top to make sure that it just gets really good pressure when that vacuum sucks it down, which you can see it doing right there. And we put that warming blanket on top to make sure that it stays at 70 degrees, which is what the glue's rated at. But here we go again. Second half, kind of a cool time lapse of that thing putting the pressure down. And the satisfying sound of it opening. So there we have it, the two separate halves of the table veneered on top, on bottom, and on the sides. We flush trim all that, and then we prepare to join the two halves of this table together. And we just use this same glue that has about a 30-minute open time, get it all filled in, and then start the struggle of getting these dominoes to line up.
Okay, so okay, try it now. All right, hold on.
I see that.
That's because they're angled. Like it needs to come.
Yeah. Oh, there you go.
That's
There you go.
Oh, look at that squeeze out. Okay, so we
Got a
don't.
little squeeze out here, but we don't want it to bend
Yeah,
up, right?
so we don't.
What's the issue?
Oh, that's just trying.
Let's do the other side. The edge will start. They're matching up pretty good right there.
And underneath, you're getting squeeze out underneath too. So
I think maybe just leave it. Kind of out of time anyway.
yeah, good.
Yeah, that's good.
This is bigger than blankets.
So that actually went extremely well. We had a little bit of an issue with too much clamping pressure would flex the table down or up or whatever. So we had to kind of adjust a bunch and make sure it was flat, but overall it went really well. The seam lined up perfectly, as you can see right there. Once I took the tape off, the edge banding just showed itself, and I mean, it almost looks like it's a totally solid piece of wood. So that was a very exciting moment. And now we just sand it down and move on to finishing. So the client wanted a high gloss finish, and I ended up putting about 6 coats on, but you can just see right there how much this burl veneer just absolutely pops. And this was right before we delivered it and just testing the fit, and it all went together really well, and I was very happy with it. So here the table is in the client's house. It's in this really cool corner room that overlooks the woods. And it was a struggle getting this thing together, but overall it went really well. And it literally taught me how to veneer, which is going to be really cool to implement into future projects and is giving me a ton of confidence for the next project, which is video number 3 and is a 15 by 4 foot conference table with a 4-way book match on top and a George Nakashima base on the bottom. And I'll actually be cutting those veneers myself with a sawmill. So that should be a really cool video. And I just want to thank everyone for watching and everyone that watched the last video and subscribed. It actually went better than I thought. And we're going to keep improving on these videos and making them better. So thank you all so much for the support. And if you haven't, please like and subscribe, and we will catch you all on the next video.